Well, welcome to Voice of San Diego at Home. I am Scott Lewis and coming at you again. Went on vacation. Appreciate all your support. I know that the throngs and throngs of fans were wondering where Voice of San Diego at Home was. Well, it was getting its brain torched by UV light and trying to recover from some neurological fatigue. But we're back. We're back strong. We've learned some lessons about how to do this better. We're going to get a little bit better. We've got a great show today. I've got some news to talk about, and we'll get into some guests. So first off, one of the things I was camping and then just staycation here. San Diego's a great place to do that. And I kept getting a lot of texts from people saying, don't look at the news. You don't want to look at the news. I'm glad you're on vacation. Don't look at the news. And I was like, that's not the best way, really, to get people to, to not look at the news, because certainly you want to look at the news at that point when somebody says, don't look at the news. So I saw it. And obviously what caught my mind was this main story, which something we've been following here at Voice of San Diego at Home for quite some time. And it was about schools and whether they would reopen. We had already heard right before I left that San Diego Unified was planning not to reopen physical schools, was going to go online only. And then this from Governor Gavin Newsom.
We are now putting forth guidelines that say schools can physically open for in-person education when the county that they're operating in has been off our monitoring list for 14 consecutive days.
14 consecutive days off the monitoring list. That is the main criteria. One of those main issues is we can't have more than 100 cases per 100,000 people. We're at like 130 or something now, and it seems very unlikely that we will get under that threshold for quite some time. Thus, no schools are happening. It's at least in the way that we've known schools for a while. This is obviously particularly devastating for me, and I'm going to put my biases out there. We have 3 kids we're trying to shepherd through educational situations right now, and I don't know what we're going to do. We invested so much time and energy and money in our community school, and it's just been eviscerated. And so, it's very hard news, but and it's caused some very hard conversations here. So today we're going to talk a lot about that. We got Councilman Cate. He's going to come on later and talk about his ideas for how we can get back into schools or outside of schools and spend some time learning. There's also I've got Will Huntsberry coming on. He's going to talk about the whole landscape with education. He did a great story today about some of the upper level politics about it as well. I just got a tweet sent to me from somebody. This is the South Pasadena Unified School District isn't opening for in-person learning, but they are providing, quote, daycare and charging $100, $180 per child per week to go to the daycare. So, schools that you pay for, I guess. Just such a weird world. We're tracking all of these new innovations as apparently entrepreneurs see opportunities abound. So we're going to be following all of that. All right, let's bring on Will, and we can catch up with some of the news. Let me check one thing. All right. Will Huntsberry. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, what's happening, Scott?
Not much. So
How
let's
do you like
talk
this
about
background? Can we just talk about my background for a minute?
It's very big improvement. For a while you had a wall with like a wire loose. And
yeah. Someone said it looked like I was a hostage, and I was like, I got to change that.
Well, nice work. You got your socialist books up there. All right, let's get into this. So, Will, the governor said that we can't have schools open in place unless we get off this list. What's that list? And I understand there's a waiver that we can apply for too. What's that?
Yeah, that's right. I think the metric that Gavin Newsom is using is 100 cases per 100,000 residents. We are a bit above that and have been for some time. it's unclear when we're going to move below that.
Yeah.
We haven't started down in that trajectory yet, but like you said, there is supposedly going to be a waiver process. Right now, Newsom says all schools in watch list counties can't open. That includes us, but the waiver will allow third grade and younger, so elementary grades, to open, but it requires the local public health official to sign off on it. So as of right now, there's not a waiver process, but when there is, some school districts seem poised to apply for a waiver and ask Dr. Wilma Wooten, our public health officer, for an exception.
Some do, but we have no indication that like San Diego Unified, for example, will, right? They're pretty committed that we're going online only for a while, and that's that for now.
Yeah, that seems to be the case with San Diego Unified. But I think the most interesting story right now is what you just mentioned, Scott, about, I'm not sure which district you mentioned, but it seems like some districts are either contracting for childcare or providing childcare themselves, and parents will be paying for it. But so we may have a situation where it's not okay for schools to open, but it is okay for people to be on school campuses for paid childcare. And that is going to create intense pressure on public schools to figure something out. So I think this is such a fast moving situation. Like, a reality is we do not know what public schools are going to do yet, and it could easily change.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're a family out there, you probably are experiencing similar pressures right now. We've got people asking us if we want to be part of their pod. We've got people asking if we want to share the cost of tutors. We've got people asking what we're going to do, and we're having really tough conversations at home. The anxiety out there is intense. It is so intense. So many people quite worried about what's going to happen, especially working parents who have no idea how, we had a rough spring, just sort of surviving with everything. And the remote learning was pretty rough in a lot of cases. And now, preparing for another year where we don't have that. So if you're a teacher or parent or education administrator or just a student too, let us know what you think. Got the comments going. I'm getting the cream of them coming over here. I'll read them out. So Will, one of the things you tracked was sort of the diversity of some of the opening plans before this governor's mandate came out. Do you think that diversity will remain? We had some districts that were going online and offering an in-place option, some that were saying no hybrid option, some that were saying definitely a couple days a week, not more, stuff like that. Do you think that diversity of options will remain when we do have a chance to go back?
I think that it will start that way. I think San Diego, just look at San Diego County, right? San Diego Unified makes up half of the students in this district. If they say we don't think it's safe to really return at all, but other districts are coming up with a big diversity of plans, like you say, that involve some in-person schooling, I think there will certainly be some pressure on the governor to potentially even that out and say, well, if most people aren't going to school, no one's going to school. It could end up like that. But yeah, I think right now people are planning on a big diversity of plans. Poway, I think you just sent me something about Poway, who said they are, as soon as they can come back to school, their plan is to do a morning shift for the young kids and an afternoon shift for the young kids. For high school, 2 days on, 2 days on at Poway.
All over the place. At first, they announced like, no way, we can't do a hybrid option. It is either all online or all in person. And now they're like, oh no, we're going to do all these hybrid options. It's so,
right. Only
and I don't blame them. It's such a logistical nightmare they're just dealing with. There was another flyer I got this week from San Diego Gymnastics saying they're going to do 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 school type stuff, program designed by California credentialed teachers. and we'll help your student get through school. You just got to pay all this money. So you can't have a gym right now inside. You can't have a school inside. But if you do them both, you can have it. My wife, that's a credit to my wife. She made that observation. But what a weird time. And you also wrote about these pods, brings up a lot of equity issues. We're all trying to grapple with them. Obviously, a lot of upper middle class and upper class folks can hire their own tutors, can hire their own private school teachers. Although I think it's going to be kind of weird. Like, are they offer workers' comp? Are they going to offer health insurance? There's going to be a lot of stuff in the way of that, but they are going to figure out a way to make sure their kids get enriching experiences and that they can have opportunities during the day that allow them to continue to work. But there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to be able to deal with that, and districts aren't really addressing that yet.
No, and I think it'll be interesting to see if districts do come up with their own kind of answer to pods. I talked to a parent today who was starting a pod, and interestingly, she did not want to be quoted in a story. She kind of wanted to talk off the record. And I think there's so much discussion of privilege when it comes to pods, and that's what my story was about. Especially if you're a pod where you're hiring a teacher, or even if you're a pod where you're not hiring a teacher, but you have enough space in your home to have 7 kids over there, that's only certain people in our society. And whether those kids have a credentialed teacher in front of them or not, if they have someone helping them stay on track, helping them log in, helping make sure they complete their assignments, those kids, it just does not take a rocket scientist to understand that those kids are going to push farther and farther ahead of the kids that we already had an achievement gap that was plaguing them. And this parent I talked to, she understood these things, and she was in a pod she's planning a pod with like 7 other students. It's not a particularly diverse pod. It's in a wealthier part of town, and you could just hear the devastation, not the devastation, but just the mixed feelings on her part on not knowing how to navigate that, and frustrated at being put in that situation that she did have to navigate it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I can't engage these discussions without feeling like deep resentment that I even have to deal with it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's like the roads disappeared, and they're like, what are you going to do to drive around? And I'm like, I don't know. Why did they disappear? Like, I know what happened, but I also feel this intense resentment that we opened up bars, we opened up restaurants. Today, the list came out of where the recent outbreaks have been, and it says restaurant, bar, restaurant, bar, restaurant, bar, restaurant, bar. And it's like, how did we do that and not secure the future of schools first? It's just such a difficult concept. I'm seeing a ton of your questions come in. One of them really hits home. This is Sherry Harris. She says, none of the districts have developed programs to serve students with disabilities, including orthopedically disabled. Yeah, I think that's one thing I think about. We rely on special education all the time. Is your pod gonna make accommodations for what we need? Is your pod gonna help help my son stay on track? That sort of thing. It's like there's a certain type of person. It's not just privileged and such that can fit with these pods. There's also like a certain type of kid that's going to work with that, and they'll probably be able to kick you out. Like, they'll probably be able to kick you out of a pod without any question. So a lot of sticky issues to deal with. Keep your questions coming. Are you an educator? Are you a parent dealing with this? Are you a school board or district administrator, or are you just a student too? So not just students are important. Let's go one last thing. Will, I wanted you to plug your piece you did today about some of the upper level politics of this. We saw something that happened this year we haven't seen before, over and over again. Los Angeles Unified School District and San Diego Unified School District were on the same page, pushing for mostly more funding, and then they jumped to close schools first, and they've led really the market, the whole state in that. How did that come about?
Yeah, Sarah Libby, our wonderful managing editor, had been pushing me to do a piece on how it came about that San Diego and Los Angeles kept making these joint decisions. First, they decided to close together in March. They pushed for funding together. They decided not to reopen together. And so I did a little digging on that, and it turned out that actually this all started before the pandemic back in December. Los Angeles and San Diego Unified decided to convene some of the big districts who were down here in San Diego in December for a conference. There was like a big schools boards conference. And so John Lee Evans, the board president here, told me he wanted to get these guys on the same page about pushing to fix longer term funding issues. You know, California is in the lower half of states in per pupil funding, and they wanted to advocate around that. And everyone's like, great, rah, rah, wonderful idea. Then the pandemic strikes in March, and everyone, I mean, just think about, go back to that time where none of us quite understood this was going to be a big deal. And then, you know, sports teams started canceling. Like, you guys were in the middle of a podcast. All of a sudden we realized, like, oh my God, we're about to get struck by this outbreak. It's going to be a huge deal. No one had any idea what to do about schools. And there was not clear guidance coming from the state. And I think that's the theme of this, is that there's been a vacuum from the state in terms of not clear guidance on what schools should do. And San Diego and LA, I don't know if they realized how much they were going to set education policy by stepping into that vacuum, but that's what they've done. You know, they when there's not clear guidance, they have started brainstorming and seeing if they could come to consensus. Then they make their decision, and then that essentially makes the decision for everybody else. They have about 15% of the student population in California, about 1 million students, but there's 6 million students in the state. And until CDE or the governor starts having a stronger hand in the policy and how we're going to move forward, I think you'll continue to see Los Angeles and San Diego make the decisions essentially for the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started about the governor. His lack of priority of the education, his lack of leadership, of guidance, of vision on education, and then allowing things to open that may have put education back for years and years is a real point of frustration for me at the moment.
Schools are in a tough spot, right, Scott? I mean, like, you know, you've got 1,000 school districts. Like, think about that. None of them are public health experts, and no one was telling them the same thing on what to do. And we're asking all those guys to fix it.
I knew it was poison the moment the state put out those guidelines, and they were garbage. Will, they were like, consider sending somebody home if they're sick. You know, it's like, God, send them home. All right, we have a couple of things here I wanted to get to, and we'll get to our guest, who's one the first politicians outside the education system, I think, who's decided to really engage this issue. Was excited to see that. Chris Cate, we got him coming on soon. But just to say, Crystal, who's running for school district TRULL. I've never learned how to say it. Sorry, it's Turul, I think. I'll learn, I promise. She made a point. She said districts like San Diego Unified need to make clear what the distance learning is going to look like this year. We've had several months. We still don't know. And then there's another question from Steve Grady. Says, do you know when San Diego Unified is going to make any announcement? There's a big meeting in a couple weeks, right?
Yes, on August 10th, we're supposed to find out more. And right now, I've been told we are going to hear about what the contingency plans are for special education students, for homeless students, like some of the most vulnerable students in our district. I think on August 10th, we're going to hear something about, is there going to be physical campuses available to them?
Yeah. Well, you know what they'll probably do is what they've been doing, which is it's special ed. They just mailed it in. So many things got mailed in. I hope that we have a lot more clarity. A lot of people worry about it. Thank you, Will, for your reporting. I look forward to some of the things coming up. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Anytime, Scott.
All right, that was Will Huntsberry. Does great work. Follow him. You should also subscribe to his newsletter. Comes out every Thursday. It's called The Learning Curve. Follows all these issues. Wrote last week about the pods concept. I'm sorry, it's every other week it comes out. All right, well, I wanted to welcome our guest for today. It's Councilman Chris Cate. Hello, Chris Cate. How are you? Uh-oh. There you go. You there?
All right, there we go. Yeah. How you doing, Scott? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. First of all, I don't care what's in your plan. I'm stoked. I just wanted to say, first of all, just pure thank you for engaging seriously the topic. I cannot tell you how mad and anxiety sort of laden I am that so many politicians, often who use schools during their campaigns, like I'm the friend of schools or whatever, even though they're running for mayor or from the city council or for county supervisors, that, you know, tying themselves to school is always a big deal. But in this moment of maybe the most significant crisis for public education in our lifetimes, I hope that we ever see, they're just gone. They're just not around. And so I just want to start by saying thanks for at least coming up with something to get us talking about what you think should happen. I read through your plan today. You know, I've got a couple of questions and things to press you on. But just to start out, like, I just respect that you got into it. What made you decide that you wanted to weigh into the conversation?
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. And, you know, a lot of it came from, I think, this whole pandemic overall. You know, the first couple of months through all of this, we, you know, went with the flow. We kind of just tried to abide by what was going on. And then over about the last, you know, month, 6 weeks, 7, 8 weeks, I personally became very frustrated with, I think, a lack of ideas that were coming forward, a lack of direction, a lack of metrics, a lack of objectives on what we're trying to accomplish. And meanwhile, I'm personally getting called from friends. We're hearing it through emails and calls from our residents, constituents, trying to figure out what's going on. Livelihoods going down the tubes, people making life and death decisions in terms of how they're going to proceed. You know, understanding what the impact of COVID is. And obviously, you know, with the announcement from the school district in the recent weeks, we've got a lot of phone calls and emails from parents, you know, just begging for direction and what to happen. And, you know, my staff, and credit goes to them, they took it upon themselves and said, we got to do something. Let's enter the conversation. You know, we're probably going to piss off a lot of, but you know what, at this point, who cares? Let's just say something. You know, I'm not saying that these are all the answers, the right answers even, but let's contribute to the conversation.
Yeah. All right. There's a couple of points in here. We talked with Will Huntsberry about the issue of waivers. And your first point is just, look, San Diego Unified should apply for one of these waivers. They don't seem interested in it. I think I don't really need to get into that deeply with you, but I think what you're just challenging is that assumption that we can't do anything right now. That they should try to come up with some way that they could get schools open in some form.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, going back and while we're doing this, reading past stories about the district, I mean, even them acknowledging the fact that 58% of the parents that they surveyed said that they want to do in-school instruction, I think provides some impetus for them to take some level of action. Now, that's not saying that they're going to, you know, flip the switch right away and open classrooms, but at least, you know, apply for the waiver so there could be some either graduated movement into the classroom, but at least acknowledging what the demand is from their parents, I think goes a long way to showing that they're listening and they want to have some sort of in-school instruction at some point in time in the near future.
Yeah. Well, what we're mostly concerned about, obviously, is the virus and the public health issue, and I don't think I've noticed any denial from there. You believe it's a public health hazard. You believe that the virus is real, and that it is something we have to deal with. And what you know, in particular, what we're worried about is teachers and adults that work in schools. There's a lot of evidence that maybe kids don't suffer too much from what's happening. They don't transmit it as much, although there is some indication that, you know, older kids transmit it as well as adults. But really, you know, we are asking public servants to go to work, and we need to make sure that they're safe, just like our employees need to feel like they're safe, and your employees need to feel like they're safe. So one of your first points on there is that we need to explore open air classrooms. You talk about how that was something that this country's done before World War II, as we worried about tuberculosis. I saw some work, some evidence of outdoor schools during the Spanish flu problem. There's a lot of talk about how outside is very safe. We haven't tracked a single outbreak locally, from what I've done reviewed in the data so far, to outdoor activity, to either protests or of any kind outside. And so outdoor does seem like a particular ally of people in San Diego as well. Your point there is like, why can't we try something? And I think if I might add, if I were to design something along that lines, get us maybe some big tents together. The schools have billions of dollars unspent from some of their construction bonds they can use for temporary structures, and see what we can do. Maybe lower expectations about what needs to maybe get done academically, but what's the best we can do for students right now? What's the best? Consider this our Dust Bowl. What's the best we can do for kids and families as we endure this national crisis? I think that's kind of what you're hinting at.
Absolutely. I think the overall point I think we're trying to make, whether with this issue or other elements of this pandemic that we've waded into and try to provide solutions, is that for so long, government and bureaucracy is almost like a group think. They all think the same way. The first answer is no, we can't do this. For whatever reason, we can't do this. But I think what the pandemic has allowed us to do is think outside the box and say, how do we? Now, I've been a part of government agencies. I serve on the board of the Water Authority, and one of the things that we heard loud and clear from our employees that were somewhat younger is that we want to be able to work remotely. We want to work from home, but no, we can't do that. That's that's just asking too much. And now everyone's doing it, so it can't be done. And that's what the approach we're trying to take now is how do we think outside the box? On the outdoor side, we live in San Diego. This is in Iowa. This is in New Hampshire. Let's take advantage of the resources that we have and the elements that are given to us. Let's see what we can do outside. And we're doing it with other outdoor establishments, whether it's dining or what have you. We're able to do it. Let's try it with classrooms. And for those schools that are fortunate enough to have a joint use park next to them, and we have them in Mira Mesa, whether it's Sauk Elementary or Wagenheim, who have large spaces right next to the school that we have agreed. Let's take advantage of those elements that we have and figure this out. As you mentioned, there's I don't think a lack of dollars to make any capital investments I need to make these things happen. It's just how do you change up your priorities to allocate those dollars?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to see streets getting blocked off for bars and restaurants, and to not see any sort of similar mobilization going on for kids, their children. They don't. I know you need to get your burgers and stuff, but there's kids that need enriching activities. Okay, let's move on to another part of your plan, and I think this taps at something really deep in a lot of us. The school district, in their presentation about what was happening, mentioned that parents were going to have to be co-teachers, but they don't get paid for that. And what you've included in your plan is a way to reward, or to maybe not reward as the best word is, to compensate parents and people at home for doing some of this co-teaching that now is going to be required. And you've put it in two forms. One is a stipend that you're talking about, that if you are going to have to homeschool, you should try to get about $3,000 back. And then another is a tax credit. Explain what a tax credit is versus a stipend.
So a stipend essentially is an allocation of dollars for you to spend on amounts. You get the actual physical dollars there to be able to spend on those things. And then a tax credit is essentially you're writing off any expenses that you have accumulated over the year when you file your taxes for the year. So they could come in different forms. I think what we're trying to say is the vehicles already exist to help cover any expenses that may occur for your co-teaching or your homeschooling for your children. That should be extended, especially given the circumstances that we're in today and what we're asking of these parents, especially for parents who may be working and are going to have a reduction in hours because they have to stay home for a certain time or whatever case may be. These are extenuating costs that we all know about that do exist. How do we alleviate any of those financial burdens that may come with now having to do distance learning for, who knows how long this is going to occur? So And then maybe an option for parents as well too. I think one of the things that we're trying to say in this, we're not saying that it's an either or all or nothing situation. Like, we're not saying that you have to go into the classroom or go into an open air classroom or whatever else. If you feel more comfortable being at home, given your own home circumstances, you should be afforded that option 100%. And here, we should help you get through this with whatever burdens may exist, either through this stipend or through some form of a tax credit.
Yeah, I mean, I think they made such a compelling point that you cannot expect us to open up if you cut our budget. Well, they didn't cut the budget, and now they're not opening up. It's like maybe, there's going to be a lot of people, particularly, and I think we all need to be honest about this, women who are going to face severe career challenges because of what's happening. And we shouldn't, there's a lot of patriarchal and gender reasons we need to reckon with that reality, but they're going to lose significant income potential, and there's at least got to be some acknowledgement that maybe there's a way to help them and to help those families through that rely on people. Frankly, I don't know how we're going to work. We're trying to picture where my kids are going to work. We're going to convert some outdoor areas of our own so that we can just make it work. But I mean, I just don't know. I think that so many people are in my same boat. Like, how are we going to survive the year?
Exactly. And in your, situation, I would imagine, and you're struggling with this and you're able to work from home.
Yeah.
Like, think of the folks who can't do that.
Yeah.
What are they thinking right now? What are they trying to figure out how to deal with it? I mean, I'm in the same position where my wife and I, and we're not school age kids yet, but our daycare has been open, remains open, and we still have the luxury of working from home. But that's not every family in San Diego. I mean, there are, tens of hundreds of thousands of folks who have to leave their home physically to be able to work and provide for their families. And now we're telling them, no, you can't do that. You have to be home. Well, I mean, you're obviously going to do what you can for your children, but at the end of the day, how can you both balance trying to be home for your children, providing that supervision and now an educational opportunity for them, while still trying to figure out how do you pay for your bills? Aside from rent and mortgage, and we're dealing with that separately, but how do you pay for utilities and all the stuff and grocery? I mean, just everyday living. And that's, again, from my situation, a level of frustration that there is no conversation about this.
Yeah. Yeah, there was I've been collecting a thread on Twitter about some of these, just pure dystopian conversations that people are having. Here's Stanford University advice to its employees about how to deal with this situation. They say, you should consider leveraging teenagers that might not be engaged in their regular extracurricular activities to tutor or simply entertain younger children. I don't know what teenagers you have in your house, but yes, they are great. They can entertain your children, but you cannot rely on them so you can be a functioning professional in life. Yeah, these employer emails are going to be pure gold content as we go through this. I do want to challenge you on one part of your plan. You talked about AB 5 that you wanted to. So let's just give a background. The state, if you have somebody working for you who does the job of what you do as an organization, let's say you're a bakery and you have a baker who works for you, the state passed a law recently after a court ruling that says that person needs to be an actual employee with workers' comp, with certain benefits and other protections. And that law was called AB 5. There was existing employment law that said if you're telling an employee what to do, that you need to treat them like employees, that if you want to have a contractor relationship with somebody, they have to have literal independence from you. They have to be able to set their time. They have to be able to be a separate, basically, business. That was the thrust of the ruling, but it's been very controversial ruling and law. You included it in your proposal and say that some of these things need to be suspended as parents go and hire tutors, hire other educational professionals, as you talked about. Why did you feel like that needed to be addressed?
Yeah, and the research that we did from a standpoint of hiring, contractors or tutors educators, licensed teachers, whatever, in a separate setting from the classroom, but having it for your own private, instruction. What we found from our research, and again, this based on our research and we put in here, is that it depends state to state based on individual state contract laws. And when you look at AB5 and the 3-prong test, you're running pretty close to having them potentially be an employee because you're dictating their hours, their work schedules, all those things. So, are you, pretty close to a position in which that is an individual who is technically an employee who is providing these services to you? If it's not, great, but we're submitting this as part of the conversation and say, if this is the choice of families that they want to go this route, is there anything that's preventing them from doing that? Or what are those potential barriers that may exist? This being one of them. If it ends up being none, and I can do that, and I don't have to, increase my cost in any certain way, then great, fantastic. But we felt that we're running pretty close to the requirements of having them be an employee and providing additional things to them. And again, that contractor may not want that, that may be a cost burden to us as a family, all these things. And so let's have this as an option that we could include in our package.
So you want to make it easier and cheaper for people to hire teachers for themselves.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, again, we're talking about additional cost burdens to families to having to provide this for them through no fault of their own. I mean, it should be relatively, affordable to be able to do that. That becomes a priority and option. Now, again, you're getting to a whole host of other arguments that are out there, and you talked about a little bit with Will in terms of the equity issue, and I totally get that and respect that. But again, what we're trying to provide are a myriad of options that do exist for that are out there that can't exist for folks. Some may be others for others, but our whole intent and goal is to open the classroom. That's what we want, because we start leveling the playing field for folks.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept. We've been talking, like I said, we've been fielding invitations from our community, our peers, to be part of their pods, to share in the cost of an educator, and it's been really uncomfortable. But one of the things, I'm an employer. I've been in employment relationships for now, as an employer for now almost 17 years. I mean, I know what it feels like, what the kind of conflicts that can come up, the kind of, sick leaves, vacation, workers' comp. Sometimes you need to fire people. Sometimes you need to replace them. Sometimes you need to discipline. Sometimes you need to evaluate. I think, it's really hard for me to picture having what ostensibly feels like an almost full-time teacher working with a pod of kids and not treat them like an employee. And I think, maybe there could be some kind of company that has a bunch of them that you contract with the company to provide some kind of service like that. But if they're your employee, doesn't it feel like they should be actually considered an employee?
Potentially, but you also don't know the duration of the contract and employment. If it's for a week and then the school's open in a week, then what do you do? And so, I mean, again, this situation is so fluid, and there is no overarching plan out there, that there's no goalpost to set your sights to. Like, I just got to get to December 31st, or I got to get to, end of September. And how do I get to that point? Because there isn't that direction that's out there, I think a lot of people are figuring this out on the fly. And I think that's a very frustrating point, and I hear you and recognize it. But do you want to hire an employee that it's only going to be for 2 weeks and go through the litany of things that have to do that? I mean, as your employer, I would probably guess not. But how do you adjust for that?
It's such a weird time. Look, I just wanted to say again, thanks for weighing in. We need more people to create more debate in this discussion, because right now school districts are being left to figure it out themselves, except that when the governor just says you can or can't do it. And so, having more people, this should be the number one priority in my mind of any public leader of any kind. How do we get schools open? If you can figure out how to get schools open, it'll inform so many other things. And I drove by and I saw my barber shop had chairs outside on the sidewalk. And, there's people making adaptations for this new reality we live in. And I just hope that the education system gets on board. Any last points you wanted to make for our commenters or any other folks?
No, I appreciate that. And again, I go back to how I started this. Look, I mean, we're not saying these are all the right answers, not by any means, but we think there are part of the solution and the part of the debate. It's somewhat frustrating when I'm told to get in my own lane when I'm commenting on some of these things. And my retort back to those individuals and specific elected officials who are saying be in my own lane is that I don't hear any other debate or discussion happening. And I'm a resident in San Diego. I'm a policymaker, and I have a voice. I'm going to use it. I'm going to speak up. I'm not afraid to do that. And neither should anybody else, because this, as you said, this is part of the discussion. And I know that I can't open the economy here in San Diego, unless we have schools, and we should be doing this. So, to those who want to just chastise me for speaking up, let's hear your options. Let's hear your ideas. Let's hear your solutions. Have a debate about them, because I don't hear anything.
It's so hard. And I, we haven't been given any indication of what the distance learning programs can be. I have one kid starting high school. I don't know how that's going to start, like what that's going to look like, how they're going to meet people, how they're going to meet their peers, how they're going to meet their teacher. There's no indication and we're trying to solve a problem for like socialization to make sure kids can socialize, but we're also being told you can't socialize. It's a virus that is literally thriving with socialization. So anyway, that's such a huge problem. Thanks for taking the time to come on and talk about it, Chris.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Cheers. Well, you guys had a lot of comments. I've been following along. We are in the middle. It seems like we're waiting for the teachers union at San Diego Unified, San Diego Education Association to make a deal with the executives at the school district to decide how things are going to look and feel with distance learning and with their requirements and their minimum sort of work requirements, stuff like that. And as you heard with Will Huntsberry earlier, we're all tracking a lot of innovations, I guess you might call them, of daycares that are going full time and recreating. I mean, they're inventing school. Like it's so fascinating to watch. I heard about a soccer club that is forming its own charter school. I mean, for a lot of these elite youth sports, the schools, the physical schools are an impediment, have long been an impediment to their elite youth programs in sports. And yeah, fine. Now they're gone. They can inject whatever education they want into them and keep them lifting weights and doing sports. It's a fascinating moment in, I think, the future of, I think public education is right now at a crossroads, and we all need to be engaged. And that's why I was pleased to see other politicians start to jump in. All right, one other a bit of news I wanted to make sure you all saw. We did some investigative reporting over the last several months about Metropolitan Transit System and its intense enforcement of, in particular, fare evasion. So they didn't have any indication that fare evasion was a big problem here compared to other places, but they decided to ramp up. In 2016, MTS officers wrote 25,000 fare evasion citations. Last year, officers handed out 66,000, and that was all the work of one man in particular. That's Manuel Guadarrama. He's the chief of enforcement at the Metropolitan Transit System, and he really wanted to crack down on fare evasion. He succeeded, and we discovered just how bad this was going for people. We took 1 week last year between June 23rd and June 29th of last year, and found that they issued thousands of tickets, and 86% of the tickets that they wrote from that 1 week went unpaid and unresolved almost a year later, which led to immense court hassles and costs for the people who got them. Obviously falls disproportionately on the poorest people. It is very difficult to actually be poor. That was 1,400 fare evasion tickets we analyzed. 86% were unresolved. a lot of these disparities and this intense focus on fare evasion enforcement and other sort of inefficient, but also just inequitable enforcement. It was the predecessor to some news this week that Manuel Guadarrama is leaving MTS. He's going to retire, and well, the leaders of MTS said it was they thanked him for his service, but had offered an opportunity to make some changes. So Lisa Halverstad on our staff did some wonderful investigative reporting about just the rather absurd levels of enforcement that they were taking on some minor issues, and the burden that put on some of our poorest residents. Great work there by Lisa Halverstad. I recommend you check it out. All right, and as you saw at the bottom of our screen, we have PolitiFest coming up September 29th to October 3rd. We were deciding whether we were going to have PolitiFest this year with the whole COVID thing, and we're doing it. We're doing it online. Our most diverse, most expansive effort ever. We're going to be able to do a lot more places and debates about places in North County and South Bay and of course, city of San Diego in a way that we've never been able to do because of technology like this. Very excited about it. Mark it on your calendar, September 29th, October 3rd. We got mayors, we got city council, we got ballot initiatives. We're going to, the theme of it is pick your future. We've got a lot to explain and talk about and debate. So stay tuned for that. And also, if you're following this stuff on schools, August 12th, we're going to have a very special town hall about what is going to happen to schools and how do we make sure it's an equitable outcome for as many people, for everybody. Schools cannot be for education cannot just be for the rich and privileged. And we are going to have a very interesting discussion August 12th, 5 p.m. Town hall about the future of this school's dilemma and how we're going to get through it. So got a lot to go. That was my puppy. She's ready for me to be, or he's ready for me to be done on this. Thank you all. And a shout out to Megan Wood, who's done some tweaking and improvements of Voice of San Diego at home. Megan, thank you. And we've done a great job, and I think it's improved. Let me know in your comments what you think, what you want to see, any guests you want to see, and I'll try to respond there too if there's any actual questions. We're all excited to see more information and to hold people accountable. Again, I just find it just horrific that we have a governor who allowed this outbreak to continue and now had to come back and say schools can't open. I mean, what's the point? What did we do for months? And we can't have schools now because of how bad it got. I mean, abject, unquestionable failure from county and state leaders, including the governor, and I think something they should wear as a stain on their legacies for decades to come. And yeah, of course, the president also. I think the president's main fault with this whole thing was allowing this debate to be about whether there was a public health problem as opposed to how we were going to solve it. And that crippled the entire approach for the country, going all the way down to counties and cities. But the governor acted independently, said he was independent, did a lot of things independent, came up with a plan, and then allowed the outbreak to get to the point where we have to have these conversations about all these weird gymnastics schools and pods and stuff like that. Anyway, we got a lot to talk about. Stay tuned, and we'll see you again Friday, 5 p.m. for the next edition of Voice of San Diego at Home.